On March 24, 2015, an Airbus A320 vanished into the French Alps, leaving behind a question that would shake the aviation world. How could one pilot lock out another, sealing the fate of everyone on board? What happened in those final 8 minutes forced a global rethink about cockpit security, making two-person rules the new standard. What really unfolded behind that reinforced door, and could it ever happen again? The answers lie hidden in chilling cockpit recordings. A cockpit voice recorder captures every sound, every word, every alarm. On Germanwings Flight 9525, the recording begins with routine clicks and low conversation, then it shifts. At 10:30 in the morning, the captain's footsteps fade as the cockpit door closes. Moments later, a soft chime rings, the signal from outside requesting entry. Silence from within. The captain's voice grows urgent, then desperate. "For God's sake, open the door!" he pleads, his words muffled by reinforced layers and panic. Fists pound against metal. The only response is the steady, unhurried breathing of the man in the left seat. No words, no explanations. Outside the cabin remains unaware at first. Then, in the final seconds, a synthetic warning blares. Terrain, terrain, pull up. The recording ends in a chorus of alarms and a rush of terrified voices. Behind the numbers and flight data, these sounds reveal the human reality of those last 8 minutes: a locked door, a silent cockpit, and pleas that went unanswered. Flight data from Germanwings 9525 reveals a pattern that leaves little doubt about what happened inside the cockpit. At 38,000 feet, the autopilot is dialed down to just 100 feet, a setting far below any safe altitude for mountainous terrain. The descent begins at a steady, programmed rate, not the erratic drop of a mechanical failure. Over the next 8 minutes, the aircraft follows this calculated path, losing more than 4,000 feet per minute at times. Speed increases as the selected value on the flight control unit jumps from 323 to 350 knots. No warning lights indicate a technical fault. All major systems report normal operation until the final seconds. At 6,000 feet, the ground proximity warning system activates. Its synthetic voice repeats the words, "Terrain, terrain, pull up." The master caution and warning lights flash, but the descent continues unchanged. Each input on the flight computers is deliberate, matching the movements of a pilot who is fully conscious and in control. The reinforced cockpit door logs multiple failed access attempts from the cabin, confirming that the lockout was intentional. The data paints a picture of a machine responding exactly as commanded, right up to the moment of impact. Reinforced cockpit doors on Airbus A320 aircraft are built from composite materials layered over a honeycomb core. They are engineered to stop bullets and to withstand explosions. The surface feels solid and heavy, but the strength comes from within, with pre-preg sheets bonded together to form a barrier that resists forced entry and rapid decompression. 3 electrical strikes, or locking points, anchor the door to the frame. These strikes engage automatically when the door closes, locking it in place with mechanical certainty. From inside the cockpit, a rotating handle allows pilots to unlock the door at any time, and a deadbolt provides an extra layer of security if the electronic system fails. Access from the cabin relies on an external keypad mounted just outside the door. Crew members enter a code, which triggers a buzzer and a green light on the cockpit panel. If no one inside responds within 15 seconds, the system grants a brief 5-second window for the door to open before it locks again. Pressure sensors monitor for decompression events, and a pre-cut escape hatch in the lower section can be opened from inside if the door jams. Under normal conditions, the system offers a secure but functional barrier designed to keep threats out while still allowing controlled, predictable operation. The cockpit door system on the Airbus A320 is built around a strict logic sequence. When someone outside the cockpit enters the emergency code on the keypad, a buzzer sounds inside the cockpit for 15 seconds. This is meant to alert the pilots, who can then choose to unlock the door with a simple toggle. If there is no response, the system automatically unlocks the door for only 5 seconds, a brief window that closes quickly. but the entire process can be overridden from inside. By moving the cockpit toggle to the lock position, a pilot can block any code entry, silencing the buzzer and denying access no matter what happens outside. This internal override is absolute. Even if the correct code is entered repeatedly, the door remains sealed as long as the lock is engaged. In the case of Germanwings 9525, this feature, designed to keep hijackers out, became the very tool that kept the captain and crew out, turning a security measure into a trap. The logic that once protected the cockpit now handed total control to the person inside, with no outside intervention possible. Andreas Lubitz's medical history reads like a warning written in plain sight. Over the 5 years before the crash, he visited doctors 41 times. Some appointments lasted only minutes, others stretched longer, but the pattern never broke. He moved from one physician to the next, collecting prescriptions for antidepressants, sleeping pills, and tranquilizers. The files show consultations with general practitioners, psychiatrists, and eye specialists, each visit for a new symptom or a recurring complaint. On March 10, 2015, just 2 weeks before the crash, a doctor diagnosed him with possible psychosis and recommended immediate psychiatric hospital care. The official note declared him unfit for work. Lubitz tore it up and hid the pieces in his apartment. Other sick notes, some dating back to late 2014, met the same fate, destroyed and never delivered to his employer. Medical privacy laws in Germany meant that unless he chose to disclose his condition, no doctor could alert the airline. Lubitz kept up appearances during routine checks, passing psychological evaluations and simulator sessions. He never mentioned suicidal thoughts or his growing reliance on medication. Instead, he researched cockpit door mechanisms and suicide methods online, searching for answers in the privacy of his home. The system that depended on honesty and self-reporting had no way to see behind the mask. Lubitz's persistence in seeking help, paired with his determination to hide the truth, left a trail of missed warnings, scattered across waiting rooms and torn paper. Commercial aviation relies on a layered system of medical checks, psychological evaluations, and regulatory safeguards to keep unfit pilots out of the cockpit. But these protections depend on honesty and disclosure, an honor system that can break down in silence. Andreas Lubitz passed all required psychological screenings, meeting the standards set by the airline and by European regulators. He completed simulator sessions, annual checkups, and regular medical assessments, each time providing the answers needed to keep flying. No red flags appeared in official records. Yet behind closed doors, Lubitz was consulting doctors at an extraordinary rate. 41 visits over 5 years. Diagnoses ranged from depression to possible psychosis, but privacy laws in Germany shielded these findings from his employer. Physicians could not warn the airline, even after one declared him unfit for duty just 2 weeks before the crash. The certificate was torn up and never delivered. In the absence of direct disclosure, the system had no way to connect the scattered warnings. There was no central registry, no cross-check between doctors, and no requirement for external reporting unless the pilot volunteered. The rules prioritized medical confidentiality, protecting personal privacy above all. As a result, Lubitz was able to hide his condition, moving from one provider to the next, collecting prescriptions and advice, while the airline remained in the dark. The safeguards in place were designed for pilots who self-report, not for those determined to conceal. This gap left the door open for tragedy, exposing a blind spot that no checklist or routine evaluation could catch. Within days of the Germanwings disaster, airline policies across Europe changed almost overnight. On March 27, 2015, the European Aviation Safety Agency issued a bulletin recommending that 2 crew members must be present in the cockpit at all times. Airlines from Germany to Canada to Australia rushed to comply, announcing new procedures before the week was out. For the first time, if a pilot left the cockpit, a flight attendant or another crew member would step in until both pilots were present again. The aim was simple: no one alone behind the reinforced door. The urgency was clear. Regulators and airline executives faced intense scrutiny from the public and the press. Every hour brought new questions about how a single person could lock out their colleague and take control of a commercial jet. By the end of March, most major European carriers had adopted the two-person rule, following that recommendation. In Canada and Australia, aviation authorities made it a legal requirement. Germany's transport ministry ordered the change for all German airlines. The European Commission's Germanwings task force backed the move, calling it an immediate measure to restore public confidence. But the speed of the rollout brought its own problems. Airlines scrambled to update manuals, brief staff, and adjust flight rosters. Some regional carriers struggled to find enough cabin crew to cover every cockpit break, especially on smaller jets with fewer staff. Reports surfaced of last-minute shuffling, delays on the tarmac, and confusion over who should enter the cockpit and when. Flight attendants, trained for passenger safety, suddenly found themselves stepping into the flight deck, often with little or no preparation for what to do in an emergency. Pilot unions voiced concerns almost immediately. Vereinigung Cockpit, Germany's largest pilots' association, warned that the rule was a political reaction, not a carefully considered safety measure. Union leaders argued that adding an untrained person to the cockpit did little to prevent sabotage and might even increase risks. In their view, the solution to rare but catastrophic events lay in better mental health screening and support, not in quick procedural fixes. Some pilots worried that the new rule signaled mistrust, undermining the culture of teamwork and confidentiality essential to safe flying. By 2017, the debate had shifted again. After 2 years of experience, several European airlines quietly dropped the two-person rule, citing operational difficulties and a lack of evidence that it improved safety. In practice, the presence of a flight attendant did not guarantee intervention if a pilot became incapacitated or acted erratically. Unions pointed out that flight attendants were not trained to handle complex cockpit emergencies or to challenge a pilot's decisions. Airlines also noted that frequent cockpit door openings, required to swap crew, could expose flights to new security risks. The European Aviation Safety Agency maintained its recommendation, but left the final decision to individual airlines. As a result, adoption became a patchwork across the industry. Some carriers kept the policy in place, while others reverted to the old standard, relying instead on strengthened mental health checks and peer support programs. The rapid rise and partial reversal of the two-person rule revealed the limits of instant solutions in the face of tragedy. Behind every new procedure, the tension remained: how to protect passengers without creating new vulnerabilities or eroding the trust that keeps crews working together safely. A row of stones lines a hillside in Le Vernet, each one engraved with a name. Parents, siblings, friends, and colleagues gather each March to remember the 150 people lost on Germanwings 9525. Among them were 16 German schoolchildren returning from an exchange trip, 2 opera singers, teachers, and passengers from 18 different countries. The memorial stands in the shadow of the mountains, a quiet place that holds the weight of unanswered questions and the pain of futures stolen. In the aftermath, families demanded more than compensation. Lawsuits targeted Lufthansa and its flight school, arguing that hidden warning signs in the co-pilot's medical history should have triggered action. German courts weighed the limits of responsibility, as investigators pointed to a system built on privacy and trust, one that allowed a pilot to fly while concealing a diagnosis of severe depression. Lufthansa ultimately paid settlements, but for many, legal closure could not erase the sense of betrayal or the need for change. Aviation authorities responded by moving beyond the two-person rule. Airlines expanded mandatory psychological assessments, requiring pilots to undergo mental health checks not just at hiring, but every year. Random alcohol and drug testing became more common, and new peer support programs offered pilots confidential help from colleagues trained to spot warning signs. The European Aviation Safety Agency clarified when doctors must break confidentiality to report a pilot unfit to fly, narrowing the gap that had let critical information slip through the cracks. In the years since, more pilots have come forward voluntarily, seeking help without fear of automatic grounding. The search for solutions has reached into the cockpit itself. Some experts have proposed technology that could override a pilot's control from the ground, or biometric systems that monitor heart rate and stress levels in real time. Others have suggested automated landing programs that can take over if a pilot becomes incapacitated. Each idea brings new questions. Remote control could make planes vulnerable to cyber attacks. Biometric monitoring risks false alarms and invades personal privacy. Automated systems may not stop a determined pilot who knows how to use them. The debate circles back to a single dilemma: how to protect passengers without stripping away the autonomy and trust that flight crews depend on. For families, the memorial at Le Vernet is a reminder that every rule, every reform, and every debate has a human cost. The names carved in stone stand for lives interrupted, journeys unfinished. The changes that followed Germanwings 9525, stricter screenings, peer support, and the ongoing search for better safeguards reflect not just a response to tragedy, but an effort to honor those lost by refusing to let their stories end in silence. The balance between safety and privacy remains unsettled, and the question of how to prevent the next tragedy lingers in every flight that crosses the sky. A locked cockpit door once meant safety. Today, it is a reminder that technology alone cannot predict human intent or prevent every tragedy. As airlines debate privacy, surveillance, and mental health, the risk remains uncomfortably real. Trust is still our final line of defense at 38,000 feet. Some questions in aviation cannot be engineered away. Share your thoughts below.